So we're going to put this alginate tray in here in the bowl. Put 45 milliliters of water. Put it in here. And then drop your maxillary typodont right in here. Don't bottom out.
There's one pack.
Make sure it's covering all the teeth surfaces. So you can grab a piece like this and play with it with your finger. Make sure you can kind of see when it's hardening. At this stage, you don't want to move the maxilla because it'll distort the model. So you just let it sit. Don't throw any of this in the sink. If you can get any of the actual alginate, put it in the garbage and then wash the rest. Alright, so now the alginate is hard, it's stiff. So now you're gonna rock your maxilla back and forth. Try to ease it out. And then it starts creeping out. And then it's gonna pop out. You wanna make sure that there aren't any holes in the occlusal or incisal surfaces of the impression, because that'll damage your mold. So this looks okay. And then you're gonna grab a knife and then clip off anything off the edges. We're gonna bring this beading wax right here, and then we're gonna start putting it on to this flange, pressing it on. So you bring your boxing wax and you put it along the bead, but you put it at a place where you're going to have enough height so that the stone model can fill that in. So you don't want to put it like this because you're not going to have enough space. You want to put it at the bottom so that you can have enough space for the yellow stone to fill in. So now we're going to turn on our alcohol torch, and then we get our number 7 spatula, warm it up, and then you can kind of go around the whole model and melt the beading wax onto the boxing wax. You get that nice liquid wax in there that'll give you your seal. And then now we flip it upside down, straighten the boxing wax a little bit so we can have access. And then now we're going to seal from this side. And then you can see that hole where the palette is, where there's no alginate. That's not a big deal. That just means you're going to get a little bit of stone there. So don't worry about that. So that should be it. Now we'll do our leak test. Pour some water in here. Let me see if it leaks. So we do have a little bit of a leak. And you want to see where it's leaking from. It's mostly the back of the model. It's like right here. It looks like it's between the tray and the beading wax. So we'll spill this, and then we'll go in and try to seal where we think it's leaking. Also, what could be happening is that little hole in the palette right here could be causing some leak. So we can grab a little piece of boxing wax, set it in here, and this shouldn't impact anything that matters in our impression. If it gets the palette, if it changes the shape of the palette, that's okay. And then we'll do another leak test. very minor leakage. We could probably go ahead. It's not like a stream or anything. So the stone is going to be a little thicker than that water, so we're not worried about it getting on the tray, on the vibrating table. So at this point, you don't want to waste time. You want to go ahead, hurry up and move on to the next step, because the alginate, if it dries, it's going to shrink and distort, and then it's not going to give you a good model. So you grab your mixing bowl, and you grab some yellow stone, some golden. You get over here to the vibrating table, you turn on the vibration, and then you start pouring the yellow stone like this, and you kind of set it in there, and you let it go into the occlusal and incisal surfaces of the teeth. You try to do this as quick as possible without getting air bubbles. So you turn up the vibration. Alright, so the stone model is no longer hot. We let it sit on the table. It's hard, you can hear it. So now we're going to go to the garbage and break this up. You can just put your spatula in the side between the wax, rip it open. So now that you have access to the stone model and you have the tray, you can just wiggle back and forth. You don't want to do one strong motion because you could rip it, break it. So now you hear that pop, came off. So now you cannot reuse the alginate impression. It's disposable, so that all goes in the garbage. You pull off the alginate here with your fingers gently so you don't damage anything. Pull off the beading wax. The model cleaned up. There's no more alginate impression in there. Now we're going to clean out the periphery, the lined area. I'm going to set the model here and flip on the switch. After you ground the periphery of the model, make sure not to hit your tooth. You're going to rinse it off. Alright, so now we're going to index the model where the canines are, and then one in the back. Normally we'd go into the preclinic, but the D ones are in there right now, and you do it with the canine. But right now we're just going to do it on this wheel. So make sure the shield is in place, and then line up where the canine is. And then you're going to basically just kind of bring it onto the wheel like this, and then get your indexes. You could even mark it if you want with like a pencil so you know where to go when you're under the wheel. Turn this off. Now we've indexed in the back and by the canines. So now that we have the maxillary model ready, it's indexed, we're going to do what's called hand articulation. So you're going to set it gently on the mandibular, and you're going to set it in the right place so that it sits into centric occlusion. And it's going to sit in a place where, when you look at it from the posterior, it looks like all the contacts are touching. And when you go left to right, it's not really moving. So now that we have that hand articulation, it could potentially lean forward and then disarticulate the posteriors. You don't want this. You don't want occlusion like this. You want occlusion like this, where the posteriors are touching and the anteriors are not touching. Because in centric occlusion, the anteriors are not touching.
So the next step is to go ahead and prepare your mounting stone to mount your maxillary cast. I use one packet to go ahead and make a thicker consistency to build up a column in the middle of my cast so that I can go ahead and close the articulator down on it so it has something sturdy to attach to. I clean up the edges really roughly. It doesn't matter. This is not what's going to be seen on the outside. It's just the inside. And I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. Once it's dry, I'm going to take it off of the articulator itself so I can better clean up the edges and mix another round of mounting stone. I'm then going to use my spatula and spread it all over in all the little creases around that initial column that I made. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fill in any gaps and use a wet ring finger to go ahead and just swipe along the sides to smooth it out and make it nice and pretty. You want to use light pressure and just a little bit of water on your finger to smooth it out. You then want to go back in with a wet finger or a wet paper towel and clean off any excess mounting stone that might be on your yellow cast. And water will help just dissolve the stone while it's still a little bit wet. And you can go ahead and run it under a nice light stream under the faucet to help smooth it out and polish it up. It's It's also helpful if you use a little bit of Vaseline on the areas you don't want stone.